Don't hide from me. The words were never loud. They were never angry. And somehow, that made Olivia's heart tremble even more. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in courage and destiny, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us that love finds the broken. Now, back to Olivia. The first time she disappeared, the servants thought she had wandered into the palace gardens. The second time, they assumed she had gotten lost in the endless halls of Blackwood Castle. By the third night, the whispers had begun. The new queen was afraid of her husband. Olivia sat curled behind a heavy velvet curtain in the west wing, pulling her knees tightly against her chest as moonlight spilled through the tall windows. Outside, snow drifted silently across the mountains surrounding the kingdom. Inside, the castle felt impossibly large, every corridor echoing with reminders that she no longer belonged to herself. 3 weeks ago, she had been the forgotten daughter of a struggling noble family. Now she was the bride of Alpha King Rowan Blackwood, the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories. Every child knew his name. Every traveler carried stories about him. They called him the Winter King. The Wolf of Blackwood. The ruler whose gaze could silence a room. Olivia had heard those stories her entire life. She had believed every one of them. A floorboard creaked somewhere down the hallway. Her breath caught instantly. Her fingers tightened around the curtain fabric. Maybe he wouldn't find her tonight. Maybe he would assume she was asleep. Maybe, footsteps. Slow. Steady. Certain. Olivia squeezed her eyes shut. Her heart hammered so hard she could hear it in her ears. The footsteps stopped directly in front of the curtain. Silence followed. Long enough for her to wonder if she had imagined everything. Then the curtain moved. Cool moonlight flooded over her face. Olivia froze. Rowan Blackwood stood before her, tall and motionless, his dark coat catching silver light from the window. His broad shoulders nearly blocked the entire opening. Yet it wasn't his size that frightened her. It was how quietly he had found her. Again. Those silver eyes settled on her trembling form. He didn't sigh. He didn't frown. He didn't look annoyed. If anything, he looked tired. "There you are," he said softly. Olivia lowered her gaze immediately. "I'm sorry." The apology slipped out before she could stop it. She wasn't even sure what she was apologizing for anymore. Rowan remained silent for a moment. Snow drifted outside. Somewhere deep in the castle, a clock chimed 10 times. Olivia. Her name sounded different in his voice. Gentler than she expected. "Why are you hiding?" She swallowed hard. She didn't know how to answer that question. Because every time someone powerful entered a room, her instincts told her to disappear. Because she had spent years making herself invisible. Because fear had become safer than hope. But she couldn't explain any of that. Not yet. So she simply shook her head. Rowan studied her for another second before offering his hand. "Come on." Olivia stared at it. No command. No impatience. Just a hand waiting for hers. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he said quietly. The strange thing was that Rowan Blackwood sounded like he meant it. And for the first time since arriving at Blackwood Castle, Olivia wondered if the stories she had been told about the Alpha King were wrong. Olivia could not stop staring at the hand Rowan had offered her. It remained there between them, steady and patient, as though he had all the time in the world. No king should have had that kind of patience. No ruler feared across an entire kingdom should have been standing in a moonlit hallway waiting for a frightened bride to decide whether she trusted him enough to take a single step. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she placed her hand in his. Warmth spread through her fingers. Rowan simply helped her to her feet. Nothing more. No lecture. No disappointment. No visible frustration. He released her hand the moment she was standing. Somehow, that simple gesture unsettled her more than if he had demanded obedience. The walk back to their chambers was quiet. Olivia kept her eyes on the polished stone floor while torchlight flickered across the walls. She expected questions. She expected him to ask why she kept disappearing. Instead, Rowan opened the chamber door and stepped aside, allowing her to enter first. The room was enormous compared to any place she had ever lived. A fire crackled softly in the hearth. Snow drifted beyond the tall windows. Everything looked warm. Safe. Yet Olivia's chest remained tight. Rowan crossed the room and picked up a book resting on a side table. Then he sat in the armchair near the fireplace. That was all. Olivia blinked. "Your Majesty?" she asked quietly. Rowan looked up from the book. "Yes?" She hesitated. "That chair again?" A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. "It is a very comfortable chair." Olivia stared at him in confusion. Since their wedding, he had slept in that chair almost every night. The bed was large enough for 2 people, but he had never once pressured her to share it. At first she had assumed it was temporary. Then a week passed. Then 2. Now nearly 3 weeks had gone by. Every evening followed the same pattern. Rowan ensured she had dinner. Rowan asked if she needed anything. Rowan wished her a peaceful night. Then he settled into the chair with a book while she occupied the enormous bed alone. None of it matched the stories she had heard growing up. The legends described a ruthless alpha king whose presence alone made warriors nervous. Yet this man spent his evenings reading beside a fireplace and asking whether she preferred extra blankets. Olivia changed into her nightclothes behind a folding screen and climbed carefully beneath the covers. She remained tense, waiting for something to happen. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The only sound came from turning pages and the occasional pop from the fire. Eventually she found herself glancing toward him. Rowan was reading quietly beneath the warm glow of a lamp. For a moment he looked less like a feared king and more like a man carrying a weight nobody else could see. The thought surprised her. Even more surprising was what followed. For the first time since arriving at Blackwood Castle, Olivia fell asleep before dawn. And for the first time in years, she slept without waking from a nightmare. The next morning, Olivia woke to sunlight spilling across the bed and the unfamiliar realization that she had slept through the entire night. For several seconds she simply lay still, staring at the carved wooden canopy above her. No sudden awakening. No racing heartbeat. No lingering shadows from old memories. Just silence. Peaceful silence. The discovery felt so strange that she almost did not trust it. She sat up slowly and glanced toward the fireplace. The chair was empty. The blanket Rowan sometimes draped across its back was neatly folded. He was already gone. A small knot of disappointment tightened unexpectedly in her chest. Olivia frowned at herself. That made no sense. She had spent weeks avoiding the Alpha King whenever possible. Why should his absence matter? Determined to ignore the thought, she dressed and headed toward breakfast. Yet throughout the day, she found herself noticing things she had overlooked before. Servants smiled when Rowan passed them. Guards straightened proudly rather than fearfully. Children from noble families visiting the castle seemed eager whenever he stopped to speak with them. None of it matched the terrifying image she had carried for years. By evening, a winter storm had settled over Blackwood Castle. Snow tapped softly against the windows while icy winds curled around the ancient towers. Olivia stood alone in the royal library, surrounded by thousands of books stretching from floor to ceiling. It had become her newest hiding place. The library felt safe. Quiet. Nobody ever seemed to come there after sunset. She settled into a chair near the back corner and opened a book she had no intention of reading. The words blurred together as her thoughts wandered. Why had Rowan married her? Why remain patient when she offered so little in return? Why continue treating her with kindness when she barely managed a complete conversation? Hours slipped by. Outside, darkness deepened. The fire burned lower. Eventually Olivia realized she had lost track of time. Panic flickered through her chest. Rowan would notice she was missing again. The thought should have relieved her. Instead, it made her strangely anxious. Sure enough, less than 15 minutes later, footsteps echoed through the distant aisles. Olivia froze. The library was enormous. Shelves formed twisting corridors that could confuse even longtime servants. Yet somehow he always found her. The footsteps grew closer. Then closer still. Finally, Rowan appeared at the end of the aisle holding a lantern. Golden light danced across the books surrounding him. His silver eyes met hers immediately. Olivia stared in disbelief. "How do you keep doing that?" she asked before she could stop herself. Rowan looked momentarily confused. "Doing what?" "Finding me." For the first time, genuine amusement crossed his face. "You always choose quiet places." Olivia folded her arms. "There are hundreds of quiet places in this castle." "True." His smile widened slightly. "But after 3 weeks, I am beginning to learn your favorites." Something warm fluttered unexpectedly inside her chest. Rowan stepped closer and glanced at the untouched book in her lap. "Interesting reading?" Olivia looked down and realized she had been holding the same page for nearly an hour. Heat rushed to her cheeks. Rowan chuckled softly. Not mockingly. Not cruelly. Just warmly. And as the sound filled the quiet library, Olivia found herself doing something she had not done around him before. She smiled. Over the next several days, something subtle began to change inside Olivia. She still sought quiet corners of Blackwood Castle. She still preferred libraries, empty balconies, and forgotten sitting rooms over crowded halls. But she no longer disappeared because she was afraid Rowan would find her. In fact, a small part of her had begun expecting it. That realization unsettled her more than she cared to admit. One snowy afternoon, Olivia sat beside a tall window overlooking the northern cliffs. A book rested open in her lap while thick flakes drifted across the gray sky outside. The castle felt unusually peaceful. Then the chamber door opened unexpectedly. The sharp sound echoed through the room. Instantly, Olivia flinched. The book slipped from her hands and struck the floor. Her breathing caught. Her shoulders tensed. For a brief moment, fear flashed across her face before she could hide it. The servant standing in the doorway froze. "Your Majesty," the young woman said softly. "I am sorry. I did not mean to startle you." Olivia forced herself to smile. "It is fine." But it was not fine. Her hands trembled long after the servant had left. She tucked them beneath the folds of her dress and stared out the window until her breathing finally steadied. Unfortunately, she had not been alone. Across the room, Rowan had witnessed everything. He had entered through a second doorway moments earlier and stopped when he noticed her reaction. Now he remained silent, studying her carefully. Olivia avoided his gaze. "I am sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For being difficult." The answer came automatically. So automatically that she did not even think about it. Rowan frowned slightly. "Olivia." His voice was calm. "Why do you apologize so often?" The question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth but found no answer waiting. Why did she apologize so much? Because it prevented arguments. Because it made people less angry. Because she had learned long ago that taking blame was easier than defending herself. Yet none of those explanations felt safe enough to speak aloud. Silence stretched between them. Rowan did not press her. He simply crossed the room and picked up the book she had dropped. As he handed it back, his fingers brushed against hers for barely a second. Olivia immediately pulled away. Not because she wanted to. Because her body reacted before her mind could stop it. The movement was small. But Rowan noticed. His expression changed. Not anger. Not annoyance. Concern. Real concern. That frightened her in an entirely different way. Most people ignored pain they could not see. Rowan seemed determined to notice it. Later that evening, after Olivia had fallen asleep, Rowan remained awake beside the fireplace. Flames flickered softly across the room. His book rested forgotten in his lap. The more he observed his wife, the less sense her behavior made. She feared raised voices, sudden sounds, unexpected movements. She apologized constantly. She expected disappointment before anyone offered it. None of those habits appeared overnight. They came from somewhere. They came from someone. Rowan stared into the fire as a troubling realization settled over him. Olivia was not hiding because she feared the Alpha King. She was hiding from something that had existed long before she ever arrived at Blackwood Castle. The following morning, Rowan began asking questions. Not publicly. Not as a king issuing commands. Quietly. Carefully. The way someone searched for a missing piece of a puzzle. Olivia knew nothing about it. She spent the day wandering through the castle gardens while fresh snow glittered beneath pale winter sunlight. For the first time in weeks, she found herself appreciating the beauty of Blackwood Castle. The frozen fountain sparkled like crystal. Pine trees stood tall against the mountains. Even the cold air felt cleaner here than anywhere she had lived before. Yet every now and then she caught herself waiting for something. Waiting for footsteps. Waiting for silver eyes. Waiting for Rowan to appear around a corner with that calm expression that somehow made the enormous castle feel smaller. Meanwhile, Rowan sat in his private study listening to reports. Most concerned trade routes, border disputes, and winter supplies. One report was different. It came from an elderly servant who had worked at Blackwood Castle for nearly 40 years. "The Queen startles easily," she said gently. "I noticed it during her first week." Rowan nodded. "Anything else?" The woman hesitated. "She thanks people for everything. Even when no thanks are necessary." Rowan remained silent. The servant continued. "Yesterday one of the kitchen girls accidentally dropped a tray. Her Majesty apologized to the girl. Repeatedly." A shadow crossed Rowan's face. After the woman departed, he stared out the window for a long time. None of these behaviors appeared without reason. Someone had taught Olivia to expect blame. Someone had convinced her that taking responsibility for everything was safer than speaking up. The realization left a bitter feeling in his chest. That evening, a formal dinner brought several visiting nobles to the castle. Olivia sat beside Rowan at the long table beneath golden chandeliers. She wore a pale blue gown that matched her eyes. The guests praised her beauty. They complimented her grace. They spoke kindly. Yet Olivia remained tense throughout the meal. Every time attention shifted toward her, her shoulders tightened slightly. Every unexpected question made her pause before answering. Rowan noticed every detail. Halfway through dinner, an older nobleman laughed loudly at a story from across the table. The sound was harmless. Friendly even. Yet Olivia flinched hard enough to spill a few drops of tea onto the tablecloth. Silence followed. Olivia immediately lowered her head. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry." The nobleman looked confused. "Your Majesty, there is nothing to apologize for." But Olivia was already reaching for a napkin, her hands trembling. Before she could continue, Rowan calmly placed his hand over hers. Not restraining her. Simply stopping the frantic motion. The entire table fell quiet. Olivia froze. Rowan's voice remained perfectly even. The tablecloth survived. A few guests chuckled softly. The tension disappeared. Conversation resumed. But Olivia could not stop staring at their joined hands. Rowan released her a moment later and continued eating as though nothing unusual had happened. Yet something unusual had happened. Nobody had scolded her. Nobody had looked disappointed. Nobody had demanded an explanation. Later that night, as snow drifted beyond the windows and the castle settled into silence, Olivia stood alone on a balcony overlooking the mountains. For the first time, tears gathered in her eyes for reasons she did not fully understand. Because every day she spent in Blackwood Castle made one truth harder to ignore. The world she had feared was beginning to look very different from the world she had been taught to expect. 3 days later, winter settled deeper across the northern mountains. Thick snow covered the castle grounds, softening every path and rooftop beneath a blanket of white. Olivia stood beside the greenhouse windows watching snowflakes drift from the gray sky. The world looked calm. Quiet. Safe. Yet something restless lingered beneath her ribs. She had spent so many years expecting criticism that kindness still felt unfamiliar. Every gentle word from Rowan left her wondering when it would disappear. Every peaceful day felt temporary, as though she was waiting for a storm nobody else could see. That evening, exhaustion followed her back to the royal chambers. The past several nights had been better than usual, but old habits were difficult to leave behind. Olivia climbed into bed early while Rowan sat beside the fireplace reviewing documents from the Kingdom Council. The warm glow of the flames painted soft shadows across the room. For a while she listened to the quiet rustle of turning pages. Somehow that sound had become comforting. She fell asleep sooner than expected. Hours later, a cold fear wrapped around her heart. Voices echoed through a distant memory. Disappointment. Accusations. Endless reminders that she was never enough. Olivia shifted uneasily beneath the blankets. Her breathing became shallow. The dream felt real. Too real. Somewhere in the darkness she heard herself whisper an apology. Then another. And another. The words slipped from her lips without thought. Across the room, Rowan looked up from his chair. The fire had burned low. Moonlight filtered through the windows. At first he thought she was simply talking in her sleep. Then he heard the fear in her voice. He immediately set aside the documents and crossed the room. Olivia remained trapped inside the nightmare. Tears glistened at the corners of her closed eyes. Her hands clutched the blankets tightly. "I am sorry," she whispered again. "I will do better." Rowan felt something twist painfully inside his chest. Nobody should sound that frightened while sleeping. He carefully sat on the edge of the bed, keeping enough distance that he would not startle her. "Olivia." His voice remained soft. "You are safe." Her breathing hitched. Slowly, she began waking. Confusion filled her expression as her eyes opened. For a moment she seemed unsure where she was. Then she saw Rowan sitting nearby. Embarrassment immediately followed. "I am sorry," she said automatically. Rowan almost laughed at the predictability of it, but sadness reached him first. "For sleeping?" he asked gently. Olivia blinked. "No, for having a dream?" She hesitated. "I suppose not." Rowan leaned back slightly. "Good. Because neither requires an apology." Silence settled between them. The kind of silence that felt thoughtful rather than uncomfortable. Outside, snow drifted against the windows. Inside, only the faint crackle of dying embers broke the quiet. Olivia lowered her gaze to the blanket. "Did I wake you?" "No, did I say anything strange?" Rowan considered the question. "Only that you are carrying far more than you should." Olivia looked away quickly. Yet for the first time, she did not retreat behind an excuse. She did not force a smile. She simply sat there while tears gathered quietly in her eyes. Rowan did not ask questions she was not ready to answer. He only remained beside her until her breathing steadied once again. And somewhere deep inside Olivia, a small fragile part of her began to understand a truth she had never known before. Some people stayed not because they had to, but because they genuinely cared. The days that followed felt different. Not dramatically different. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But Olivia noticed. She noticed that she no longer searched for hiding places the moment she entered a room. She noticed that her shoulders did not tense quite as quickly when Rowan appeared beside her. Most surprising of all, she noticed that she had started looking forward to their conversations. They were never long. Sometimes only a few minutes shared over breakfast or while walking through the castle gardens. Yet each small exchange seemed to settle something restless inside her. One afternoon, a rare break in the winter weather brought pale sunlight across the snow-covered grounds. Olivia found herself wandering farther than usual, following a narrow path that curved behind the castle. The world was quiet except for the crunch of snow beneath her boots. For the first time in years, she felt peaceful. Then she heard laughter. Several young village children were gathered near the frozen pond below the castle walls. The moment they spotted her, they waved enthusiastically. Olivia hesitated before approaching. She had never been particularly comfortable around strangers. Yet something about their excitement felt genuine. Within minutes, she found herself helping them build a snow fort. Their laughter echoed across the hillside. Hours passed before she realized how much time had slipped away. As the sun began sinking behind the mountains, one of the children suddenly pointed toward the castle. "The king is looking for you." Olivia turned. Her breath caught. Rowan stood several yards away near the path. Snowflakes drifted around him. His dark coat contrasted sharply against the white landscape. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then something unexpected happened. The children rushed toward Rowan without hesitation. They surrounded him immediately, eager to show him their unfinished snow fort. Olivia watched in amazement as the feared Alpha King listened seriously to every explanation. When one little girl proudly declared herself commander of the fort, Rowan bowed as though speaking to royalty. The children burst into delighted laughter. Olivia could not stop smiling. Eventually the children returned to their families, leaving her and Rowan alone beneath the fading winter sky. "You looked happy," Rowan said. Olivia glanced down at the snow beneath her boots. "I think I was." The admission felt strange. "Honest." Rowan studied her quietly. "You should smile more often." Heat touched her cheeks. "I do not know how." "That is not true." His voice carried gentle certainty. "I have seen it." Something warm spread through her chest. They began walking back toward the castle together. For several minutes neither spoke. Yet the silence felt comfortable. Then, without warning, a strange sensation brushed against Olivia's awareness. It felt like warmth. Like sunlight breaking through clouds. She slowed slightly. Rowan glanced toward her. "What is it?" Olivia shook her head. "Nothing." But it was not nothing. For the briefest moment, she had felt connected to him in a way she could not explain. Not through words. Not through sight. Something deeper. The feeling vanished almost immediately, leaving her confused. Rowan remained thoughtful as they continued walking. Because he had felt it too. And for the first time since their marriage, both of them unknowingly took a step toward a bond neither had expected to find. 2 weeks later, Blackwood Castle hosted the largest winter gathering of the season. Nobles arrived from every corner of the Northern Territories. Carriages lined the snowy courtyard. Lanterns illuminated the castle walls with golden light. Music drifted through the grand hall while hundreds of guests filled the room with conversation. Olivia stood near the entrance, trying to steady her breathing. Months ago, an event like this would have terrified her. If she was honest, part of her was still terrified. So many eyes. So many strangers. So many opportunities to make a mistake. The old fears whispered quietly at the edges of her thoughts. Yet something had changed. Rowan stood beside her. Not in front of her. Not controlling her. Beside her. The simple difference mattered more than anyone could understand. Throughout the evening, visiting nobles approached to offer greetings. Some were kind. Some were merely curious. A few looked surprised that the quiet young woman beside the Alpha King was the same bride they had heard rumors about. Olivia answered politely and did her best to remain calm. For a while, everything went smoothly. Then she overheard a conversation she was never meant to hear. Two noble women stood near one of the marble columns, speaking in hushed voices they clearly believed would remain private. She hardly says anything. Perhaps that is why the king chose her. Soft laughter followed. I heard her family was barely respected before the marriage. Strange choice for a queen. The words were not cruel enough to cause a scandal. Yet they landed harder than the women intended. Olivia felt her stomach tighten. Old memories stirred immediately. She lowered her eyes and took a small step backward. For years she had survived by becoming invisible whenever criticism appeared. Her instincts urged her to do the same now. Leave quietly. Say nothing. Pretend it did not hurt. She almost succeeded. Then a familiar voice interrupted the moment. Olivia. She turned. Rowan stood only a few feet away. His silver eyes studied her face for a brief second. Somehow he always knew. Without another word, he extended his hand. The entire hall seemed to pause. Hundreds of conversations softened. Olivia stared at him. Come with me, he said gently. Confused, she placed her hand in his. Rowan led her toward the center of the ballroom. The musicians gradually lowered their instruments. Curious guests turned to watch. Even the two noble women fell silent. Olivia's pulse raced. She had no idea what was happening. Rowan stopped beneath the largest chandelier in the room and faced the crowd. The hall became completely quiet. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Rowan spoke. Many of you traveled great distances to attend tonight. His voice carried easily across the room. You have honored this kingdom with your presence. The crowd listened attentively. Rowan turned slightly toward Olivia. There is something else I would like everyone to understand. Olivia felt her breath catch. Rowan's expression softened. This woman has brought more kindness into Blackwood Castle than anyone realizes. Silence filled the room. She treats every servant with respect. She cares for every child she meets. She reminds people that strength does not always arrive wearing armor. Olivia could hardly believe what she was hearing. Rowan looked directly at the gathered nobles. I am proud that she stands beside me. No one laughed. No one questioned him. The entire hall remained silent because every person present could hear the sincerity in his voice. Then, slowly, applause began. One person. Then another. Soon the entire ballroom echoed with warm approval. Olivia blinked rapidly as unexpected tears filled her eyes. Not because she enjoyed attention, but because for the first time in her life, someone had chosen to see her clearly in front of everyone. The applause seemed to last forever. Olivia stood beneath the chandelier surrounded by warmth she never expected to receive. For years she had learned to make herself smaller whenever attention turned her way. Now hundreds of people were looking at her, yet for the first time she did not feel the need to disappear. Rowan remained beside her through it all. Steady. Certain. Present. Later that night, after the guests had retired and the music had faded, Blackwood Castle settled into peaceful silence. Snow drifted beyond the windows, covering the mountains in silver moonlight. Olivia stood alone on the balcony outside the royal chambers. The cold air brushed gently against her cheeks. She should have felt exhausted after the evening. Instead, her thoughts refused to settle. Everything had changed. Not in a single dramatic moment. Not because of a grand declaration. It had changed through countless small acts of kindness. A patient conversation. A reassuring smile. A hand offered without expectation. The balcony door opened softly behind her. She did not flinch this time. She did not hide. Rowan stepped outside carrying 2 warm cups of tea. Without a word, he handed one to her. Olivia accepted it with a grateful smile. They stood together watching snowflakes drift through the darkness. You were very quiet tonight, Rowan finally said. Olivia laughed softly. I was trying to understand what happened. And have you? She considered the question. Not completely. Rowan nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. Silence settled comfortably between them. The kind of silence that no longer felt empty. After a few minutes, Olivia spoke again. Why did you do it? Rowan looked toward her. Do what? What you said in the ballroom. His expression softened immediately. Because it was true. Olivia lowered her eyes. Even now, praise felt difficult to accept. Rowan seemed to notice. You still do not see yourself the way other people do. The words lingered in the cold air. Olivia stared out at the mountains. I am trying. That is enough. For a moment neither spoke. Then Olivia felt something shift inside her. A door she had kept closed for years. Fear had built the walls. Loneliness had reinforced them. Yet somehow, without forcing anything, Rowan had patiently waited outside until she was ready to open them herself. She turned toward him fully. His silver eyes reflected moonlight. The same eyes she had once feared. The same eyes that now felt like home. A smile touched her lips. I have something to tell you. Rowan waited. Olivia took a slow breath. The first night I came to this castle, I thought I would spend the rest of my life hiding. The admission hung between them. Rowan said nothing. He simply listened. Olivia looked at him and felt courage bloom where fear once lived. But I was wrong. Her voice grew steadier. I was never hiding from you. Understanding filled Rowan's expression. Olivia smiled through the tears gathering in her eyes. I was hiding from the world. Rowan reached for her hand. This time she met him halfway. Snow continued falling around Blackwood Castle while the mountains stood silent beneath the stars. And for the first time in her life, Olivia no longer felt like someone waiting for happiness to disappear. She had found a place where she was valued, protected, and loved exactly as she was. Standing beside the man who had patiently taught her that kindness could be strong, she finally stopped looking for places to hide and began looking forward to whatever came next.